And showing up, even with a short film at a film festival, is a much different thing than I'm a stand-up coming into, you know, let's say Houston to do a week there. Suddenly people look at you differently, right?
Yeah, and so I had all that. I mean, I was doing really awful gigs around the country. Also, comedy was starting to die. It was the late 80s, and clubs were closing everywhere. So I was working clubs for no money, for no audience. Literally, you'd go to a comedy club, there'd be 12 people on stage. Like the Comedy Cellar here in New York, there would be no audience, and they'd make you go on stage to literally an empty room, and you had to stand on there and tell jokes, because the owner's feeling was if somebody sticks their head in and there's no show, then you got to prime the pump. So I've actually did a bunch of shows at the Comedy Cellar, not even a waitress, but I had to tell the jokes.
Okay, somebody looks in the window.
Yeah.
Keep the room
show
dark
going on. Yeah. So I did that, and then I was doing this film stuff, and then I made a film called Ice Cream, which was really simple and black and white, and that one went to Sundance, and it won the grand prize at Aspen and a bunch of. That one just really blew up and did great. And then the Conan show started in '93, and they, same as Caroline's, just threw the net out who's funny and who can write, and I had these short films that were like bona fide, good, well-made comedy shorts.
Now, how many people were on that writing staff?
I think there were 6 of us on the first staff. And this was before the show was on the air. This was like, the show came out in September, and I got hired like in May.
That's almost shocking to me, because to follow Letterman, and there was all the controversy about Letterman has jumped, you would have thought that the network would have thought, we need huge writing staff to take care of this kid.
Right.
And make sure this thing works out. It's your first real national gig, and there's only 5 other guys on the staff.
It was a small staff.
Yeah.
It was a great staff. But for me, it was the biggest thing that ever happened, because I was dying. The films, I'd done them, and then and that was over. And stand-up was I really wasn't making the rent. And my mom had no more money, so she never had any money. But I was going to give up, and I Saturday Night Live auditioned people for a new cast first. And they hired every one of my friends. Dave Attell, Laura Keitlinger, Janine Garofalo, who we started together in Boston. Everybody. Jay Moore was this young kid. He got hired. Like, everybody I knew got hired except for me.
On that same stand-up show?
On that same, either as a writer or as a performer on SNL. And I got nothing. And so I called my friend who was living in San Francisco, and I said, maybe I'll move there because it's nice there. And just do something else. Like, I was literally had decided to quit show business. It's the only time I actually made that hard decision, like, I'm quitting. This stinks.
Oh, because 5 out of 6 people go on to have a great job.
Yeah, and I wasn't making a living. So I wasn't making a living doing stand-up, and I didn't get a TV job, and I was really down. And I had decided, like, at 3 in the morning one night to quit. And the next morning, I got this call from this guy who said, hi, my name's Robert Smigel, and I'm running Conan. I don't know if you heard. I hadn't heard about Conan. I'm like, who's Conan? And he said, we're replacing Letterman. I'm like, what's Letterman? What happened to Letterman? I didn't even know. I didn't even know that he was going off the air. And he looked at my short films and hired me and completely saved my life.
Wow, that's a crazy story.
Yeah.
You're about how old now?
I was 24, I think, 25.
Wow. So again, even though you're like, oh, things aren't working out, you've already done short films, have been in festivals, you're doing stand-up, you've been on TV, and yet you still feel like a failure at this point.
And also, again, the default for me, once there's nothing going on and nothing to do, I'm back to being this guy in this body that I hate.
Right, that you despise.
Just feeling bad. Walking in the hot sun, there's a stitch in my side, and I can't drink anything that really makes me feel better.
You really need to stay busy at all times.
Exactly.
So here you're 24 years old, and you're at 30 Rock. This is real show business now.
Shit, yeah, it was huge. And I never got used to going in that building, 30 Rock. Every time I went in, I'm like, I can't believe how cool this is. I worked there for 2 years, and every day that I went in the building, I was just like, this is, I felt like Mary Tyler Moore is spinning around.
Right. And the show, and people forget this now because Conan's such a huge star. He took a lot of heat when that show started.
Yeah, people hated him, and and that was another thing that I learned from Surviving Failure, was watching him take just shots to the head and having no retort because he didn't earn the show.
Right. They hated him because they didn't know him.
Yeah, and he never performed. Like, literally, his first professional performing job was the fucking Conan O'Brien show. And so He couldn't even go, yeah, well, fuck you. He had to go, I know, well, I'm trying though, please. But he just stuck to it. And there was so many days, so many Fridays where everybody was calling their agents where we were told definitively this is the end of the line. And Conan would take off his jacket and take a deep breath, and he'd get on the phone with the network. And he just somehow would go, guys, I just know we can get some traction. He defended.
He never had a contract, right? It was a week-to-week deal?
Yeah, no, he could have been fired any minute. And they kept saying, I remember one day Rick Ludwin, who was the big late-night chief, said to us, one day he came in and said, guys, these Sandinistas are climbing over the walls. And I'm going to just drop my gun and run. I can't do it. And so we were all like, well, it's over. And that went on for like 2 years, it felt like that. To the point where sometimes we were like, couldn't you fucking cancel the show? Like, I wanted it to get canceled because it was so tense. But Conan stuck to it. And also, we were writing for him really hard to sell, weird, fucked up bits that a lot of them bombed, and this poor dude would just sit there with sweat trickling down his neck, and he'd do them, and he would never bail on a bit. He just I really learned to respect him from that.
So he's a real tough guy in terms of being able to just wait this thing out.
Yeah, nothing can hurt Conan. He's very strong guy.
And you're talking to Smigel's on the writing staff, and is that where you really learned about comedy?
Yeah, that's how I learned about comedy writing.
Yeah.
And putting together comedy for television and how to put it, how to make it work for an audience and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I think that's something most comics don't try to, is to write for other people. And how do you come across as how write for someone with a totally different personality than my own?
Well, we were doing comedy sketches on that show, so I didn't write his monologue. I didn't have anything to do with that, but we would write. It was like making little movies or stage plays. Because the great thing about Conan or any talk show is that some of the stuff takes place in front of an audience. So we got to try these two things. Some of them were film bits that you'd go out and shoot and produce with characters and stuff, and other ones were bringing characters into the audience and learning how to work a script and cue cards with an audience there and stuff. I mean, an amazing experience.
Especially for someone with no experience doing this.
Nothing. And the other guys, one of them was Dino Stamatopoulos, who's now doing a show called Moral Oral. That's a great show. And just a bunch of guys. Everybody's gone on to do different things. But
do you think that show is what gave you the credibility to move in some of the other places you went?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Robert and Conan were really generous. And if it was funny, you got to run your bit. If you wrote something funny, they'd go, okay, go do it. And you'd literally get to cast it and direct it. And when I was 24, and if it was my bit, I would direct Conan. I'd sit on the couch next to him going, here's what you do, and I'd just boss him around. And he let me do that because if you were funny, they wanted you to run it. They trusted you. So I got a huge amount of experience and then credibility because people started to know I was doing these bits. I was also the first one to do stand-up on the show because they just said, come downstairs and do a set. Like, it was just come down, eat your lunch, come down and do a set. So I got to perform on the show and do stand-up on the show. And
so you never abandoned the stand-up thing as you're writing?
No, I used to actually run out of it because the writing sessions would go to like 3 a.m. And sometimes I would say, I'm going to go to the bathroom, and I'd go to a comedy club and come back. I did that a lot because I've never stopped doing stand-up because it's saved my life every time that I've bottomed out.
So why ever leave that show? Why not? Why aren't you still there? It seems like a great gig.
Yes, it is, but it's 5 nights a week. It's really hard. And actually, when Robert left, they asked me to take over and be the head writer. And at that point, I was 26, and that was pretty amazing. But I didn't want to do it because it felt like a job. It felt like a real job, and I was really burnt. 5 nights a week is really hard to do.
At a certain point in your career, because I know you brought up the Pryor thing, and I think he's the first comic for me that started working from a place of truth, whether or not it happened to be funny. At a certain point in your career,
Louis was on my original writing staff. Louis C.K.
Is that right?
He's one of the first guys we hired.
And did you think this guy is going to be, his writing career is going to take off, or did you think, no, a performer is what he's going to end up doing?
I thought he'll be dead in 2 years. I remembered thinking, well, he was always extremely talented, funny writer, but what's interesting about Louis is he was always that guy, but the medium had to grow to meet him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? He was the right guy. He was that funny in who he was in 1993, but TV was too mass market then. He needed FX channel to, he actually had a show. He had a show, I think, on HBO.
Yeah, Lucky Louie.
And it didn't gel yet. He needed more time to go by. It needed to be single camera. It needed to be moody. But there are so many shows today that exist that couldn't have existed 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And they're brilliant.
Yeah.
But it used to be all or nothing. You're either the big hit or you're off in 3 weeks. And now we have things can be more nuanced.